everybody have 2 o'clock on their phones? Okay. We have a lot of material. We have a lot of material that we want to share, so let's go ahead and get started. So you guys signed up for the flash mob, right? Okay, I'm thinking like an 80s song maybe? Thriller, Michael Jackson, something? No? Okay, let's do project management instead. And let's talk about some governance. So we're going to talk about, actually we still have a couple more people coming in. And can everyone hear me in the back? No. Can you hear me now? Getting better? I'll stand closer and I won't move around. How's that? Still better? All right. There we go. Right up in front of me. Okay. So we are here today and we're talking about three different topics. We're going to talk about governance, we're going to talk about leveraging project resources, and we're going to talk about team building. My name is Marie McIntyre. I work for Xerox and I'm working on the CAMUS project. I'm the EPMO Deputy Director there. And with me today are my trusty sidekicks, Jenny Clark and Paul Abrams. And they'll come up after me and hopefully entertain you more than I will. So does everybody here know what an EPMO is? Okay. CAMUS, because we're going to spend some time talking about CAMUS. CAMUS is the California Medicaid Management Information System. And that project involved a takeover from the legacy vendor and then an assumption of operations, running the operations, and then what's still ahead of us is system replacement. So lots of money invested, lots of time invested, lots of different vendor partnerships, and a long road ahead of us in terms of getting to system replacement. It's similar to some of our other large projects here in California where we have legacy systems that are literally decades old that are being replaced. So we've all experienced that where the program you're working on is 30, 40 years old, right? Okay. So a little bit more about my background. As I was trying to think of a way to introduce myself to you, I thought, what would make me qualified to stand up before you guys and talk about tips for project success, right? Because it's not that I've only worked on projects that have been successful or that have come in on time and on budget. I only say that that's true, but it's not. So I've spent about 15 years working in child support. So I worked for San Francisco County as a child support case investigator there, and then I spent a little more than a decade with one of the legacy vendors on the CSAS project. I was working for San Francisco when SACS was visited upon us, if anybody remembers that one. So that was fun. Then most recently, in the last couple of years, I've been working on the CAMUS project in the EPMO there. So tell me a little bit about you. Who here today is from finance? Maybe by show of hands. Nobody. Okay. Department of General Services? Thank you. SCO? Managed healthcare? All right, people have signed up that didn't come, and I think I have people that have come that didn't sign up. All right. How about DMV? Okay. Franchise Tax Board? OSI? Okay. Secretary of State? CDCR? More people that showed up and didn't come, or signed up and didn't come. EDD? And DHCS? Nobody here from CAMUS except my trusty colleagues here? All right. Lottery? Okay. And then Public Health? Department of Technology? And Department of Veteran Affairs? Anybody whose name I didn't call or whose organization I didn't call? Which ones? Let me shout out. Social Services? Fiscal. One more? Uh-huh. Anybody else? CalSTRS. I see one last hand over there. Managed Healthcare. Okay. So it seems like people have done some switching around. So hopefully you're here because you wanted to be here. Okay. We're going to talk about 3 main topics I mentioned. The first one up is governance, and I had a nice segue from our keynote speaker at lunch, so that was good. So remember Holly this morning, and she had those little bubble cards? And she talked about assumptions and challenging her assumptions. If I had bubble cards, if I had Holly's props, I'd be holding up that bubble card now. And I would say that some of the things that I think or I hear about governance are that it is just another status meeting, or that it's not a decision that I can influence or that I can impact, or that that decision is above my pay grade. What folks were telling you during the keynote speeches, and what I'm telling you is that we can all influence that. There's a gentleman that I really respect from our IV&B partnership who talked to me about this superhero complex. And he said, project managers all think they're superheroes. And I thought, oh, goody, I have always wanted a cape and my own invisible jet, right? So what he said to me after I talked about my cape for a while was that project managers think they're superheroes, and they will think that they have it under control every day or that they can get it back under control. They will never admit when they need help. Governance is there to help you, and if you use it, it can help you. So I think you should embrace it. It's kind of like eating Brussels sprouts. It's good for you, and you should do it. So governance, according to the Project Management Institution, is a implementation that is a unique endeavor which has to be properly understood. It has to properly be planned for in order to be accepted by the entire performing organization. So we can set up a very fancy governance program, but if we don't have buy-in, it will not serve our purposes. So some of the objectives that we focus on for governance at the CAMUS project is to make decisions and take action at the lowest possible level within your bounds of authority, to establish a consistent model for escalation of issues and risks and change requests so that every project knows exactly where to go to get help or where to go to get decision, and they're all doing that in a similar and consistent manner. We use that to identify cross-project touch points because it's not that common where we have one single project and everyone's focused on it. More often than not, we have a couple of different projects, people are competing for resources, they're competing for test environments. We use our governance to identify where projects might be about to collide and to try to avoid those collisions. And we utilize peer-based groups to achieve these objectives. So I'm not going to put a business analyst in a room with the CEO and expect that's going to be a fair and balanced conversation, right? So we try to keep things peer-based. As you're setting up a governance model, you need to think about your decision model, and it's usually best to think about the decision model before you have to have your first governance decision. Otherwise, you'll get some strong personalities that will take over, and they may or may not take over in the way that you want your decisions to be made. So Project Management Institute indicates that designing a model with a strong understanding of your culture, your hierarchy, your politics, your relationships, your vendors, your partners, and all of your alliances. Think about Survivor and the way they make decisions on that reality show, right? You have to have a strong decision model in order to allow your stakeholders to make decisions without beating each other up. So some common decision models that I've seen on projects that I've worked on are a voting model, very straightforward. You have to figure out who are the members that are required to vote and allowed to vote, and then what's that threshold? Is it a majority plus one? Is it 70%? Some kind of threshold that tells you what would be an acceptable vote. Another common one is consensus. That's the one that we use at CAMUS the most. And that involves basically having your discussion about whatever issue has been escalated through governance and testing for consensus, talking through your objection points and finding out if you have reached an agreement point or if people are going to stand aside or if you truly are at an impasse. And if you're at an impasse, you would escalate it up to the next decision model there. Any other decision models that you guys use in your projects or your governance programs that you'd be willing to share? No? Okay, well, we'll go with these two for now. All right, so I'm going to talk I'm going to talk for a little bit about this diagram. This is the CAMUS governance diagram, and we'll hit another couple of diagrams in a few minutes. This diagram represents a top to bottom approach and both a bottom to top approach. Make sure you guys can still hear me as I play with the pointer here. So at the bottom of our diagram here, we have our projects and our operations, and then we have a work group level. So we have integration and change control work groups, and those, when they need some decision making, will escalate up to our first layer of decision making, which is the Senior Project Management Committee and the Change Control Board. We do have those as two unique bodies. And then our second level of decision making is this layer here. You'll see that everything meets in the middle at our CAMUS Enterprise Oversight Committee. And then if we are really in trouble and we have to escalate further, that would go up to our Executive Leadership Council. You can see two offshoots here. We have a contract issue resolution team, CERT. So when we have significant disagreements about the scope of the contract or the language of the contract, we would refer out to our contract issue resolution team, which is jointly held by our state counterpart and our vendor. And then we have our CAMUS advisory group, which is our once monthly external stakeholder meeting. EPMO, the group that Jenny EPMO is the wrapper around all of these work groups and projects and provides the administration and support for governance and makes sure that everything is properly tracked. It's recorded in our project-wide repository. It's easily available. EPMO performs all of those functions within the governance organization. Another important thing when you're setting up a governance program, or maybe something to revisit if you haven't looked at your program for a while, is what is the frequency of your cycle? As projects start out, maybe you don't need to meet every week, maybe you need to meet every month or a couple of times a month, but take a look at what your need basis is for meeting on a governance program and then set the pace of your decision making according to that. At Camus, we have set this up deliberately for a weekly flow, and so if I'm a project and I need some assistance or a decision that I can't make at my authority level because I don't have the budget authority to do that, for example, I can raise that up through governance and I can hit my work group level, my integration work group or my change control work group on a Tuesday. If that group can't help me solve my problem, I can escalate it to the first decision-making body, which is our Senior Project Management Committee or our Change Control Board, and they meet every Thursday, so I've got a very rapid escalation process there. And then finally on Friday, if I'm still seeking help, I can get that into our Enterprise Oversight Committee on Friday for some executive-level decision-making. So this group here, they meet Tuesdays, they meet Thursdays, they meet Fridays. Different groups meet different days of the week, and they're dealing with anything that's been escalated, whether it's a project issue, a project risk, or a project change request. And I can get my question asked and answered within a week. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these work groups, but before I do, I want to talk to you about the exercise that we're going to do when I am done talking to you. And so every table has a role to play when we get to our governance exercise. And so as I talk about these work groups, I want you to think about which table you're sitting at. So table 1, you guys, you're going to be the vendor risk owner when we talk about our risk in a little while. Table 2, you guys are going to be the state risk owner and the author of the risk that we're going to work through. Table 3, you're going to be the integration work group that we're going to talk about in just a moment. Table 4, you're going to be the Senior Project Management Committee. And Table 5, way in the back, you're going to be the Enterprise Oversight Committee. Anybody need me to repeat that? Yes. Okay, so Table 1, vendor risk owner. Table 2, state risk owner. Table 3, integration work group. Table 4, Senior Project Management Committee. And Table 5, Enterprise Oversight Committee. There's going to be a risk in your packets, and I'll tell you where it is in a couple of minutes. But as we talk about these work groups, if you're Table 3, for example, and you're the integration work group, you're going to want to pay attention to this slide. All right, so back to our diagram here. The integration work group, if you want to pull up your hard copy, that might be easier. Our slide gets a little small here. The integration work group is the first stop for project escalated issues or risks. And this group focuses on the cross-project analysis of our issues, our risks, our status, and our schedule. This group will dispose of those escalations if they can, if it's within their authority, or they'll do the staff work to make sure that the escalation item is well documented, well understood, and can be easily decided upon by the next governing body. This group tries to perform problem solving when they can, and a lot of enterprise communication. So if I am a project that is about to collide with another project from a test environment, this is the group that I'm going to go to try to negotiate some sort of arena in which both projects can get through that testing environment in a compatible fashion without impacting anybody else's schedule. Or if I need to share some resources from our quality management organization from one project to another, for example, I might go to the integration work group to see if I can't make a trade of those resources. Our change control work group focuses primarily on change requests and does the analysis and prioritization of all of the change requests that are going to be escalated. This group also does work on some issues and risks for our operations side of the house, but we're not going to focus on that too much today. So this group does the staff support to consolidate and prioritize and make a recommendation for every change request that comes through, so that when it actually gets to the change control board, there's a nice neat package that says change control work group recommends that these 5 be approved, for example, but these other 2 need more work or they need to be denied because they're not within our scope. The Senior Project Management Committee is the first stop for official decision level making for our projects. And so while the integration work group can try to negotiate solutions, the buck starts stopping at the Senior Project Management Committee. And so this group is charged with actually disposing of project-specific issues and risks or escalating them up if they can't. This group also is where we have a very intense focus on newly created issues and risks, and so we try to place some emphasis on the management that is attending that group to make sure that all of the new risks and issues that have been created by the project have been looked at by the management team. We also utilize our and leverage our stakeholders there. So we invite our IB&B partners and our IPOC partners into that meeting so that there's some transparency there or increased transparency there. And we ask that IB&B share their preliminary findings. So IB&B, if you're lucky enough to have them on your project, they usually have some sort of monthly obligation to write up the IB&B report. Our IB&B has graciously agreed to come to our senior project management committees and share their preliminary findings. Sometimes there are things we need to respond to. Sometimes there's opportunities for us to share more information back to IB&B, but it gives us a chance to understand what IB&B is observing in a management committee that is staffed by both our vendor and our state partners. Our Change Control Board is, again, much like the SPMC or the Senior Project Management Committee. Our Change Control Board is the first level of decision-making for change requests. And so once they have reviewed all of that staff work that the CCW has provided, hopefully their job is fairly easy in terms of approving or denying change requests. And then our CAMUS Enterprise Oversight Committee. This is where projects and operations and change control all meet in the middle. This is the second level of decision-making for our escalated items. And this is structured as a direct interaction between our executive level on both our state and our vendors. This group provides the strategic direction for the projects within our program, and this is the only group that can refer items out to the CERT team, that contract issue resolution team. So that means that if I decide I have a contract issue, I can't go engage those expensive lawyer types just because I think it's a contract issue. I need to make sure that I have vetted that with my executives before I call in the big guns. And then finally, if we have to, we have our Executive Leadership Council. Now, they meet, of course, for other business reasons, but from an escalation perspective, this would be the final stop for an escalation. So something that would get escalated from the project level would have to be pretty big to get all the way up to ELC. An example of what we might escalate there would be an actual request to change a baseline project implementation date or go-live date. This provides the strategic direction for our program overall and is the coordination point for our communication with our external stakeholders. Let's take a look at some other governance diagrams. So this is the lottery portfolio governance diagram. And similar to the last diagram I showed you, you'll see an escalation path that goes up. It's hard to read, but it is in your packet. And then a decision path and a prioritization path that comes back down. So some of the interesting things that I saw in the lottery portfolio write-up are that they're trying to avoid propagating redundant committees because nobody wants to go to any more meetings that they have to, right? So make sure that your committees are not redundant with each other, that decisions are made at the most appropriate level, and then that oh, I've lost my space here. I apologize. There's one more third important thing, and I wanted to tell you about them. They use escalation for prioritization of competing demands. And so I mentioned, for example, in our integration work group, if we have competing demands for a test environment, we would work that starting at the integration work group. This group also focuses on competing demands and then doing what's best for the project here. So a very different picture, but the goals are very similar, which is interesting when you're looking at different governance diagrams across our projects here. I'm going to pull up a couple of different ones now that I need a little bit more space. So we're going to look at Fiscal's data governance structure and then the Child Support Services IT governance process flow. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay, so this is the fiscal data governance structure, and one of the really interesting things when I think about if I'm trying to design a governance model, the interesting things about fiscal is not just the size or the age of the legacy systems that are being replaced, but the makeup and the components of the community that make up that governance. So you have 4 unique partner agencies plus the vendors and the vendors' partners. That's a lot of opinions, right? To try to get through a decision, you've got a lot of different opinions, a lot of masters to serve when there are 4 partner agencies and the vendor all trying to get work done. This data governance board also uses a couple of different decision models. So not just one, like at Camus, we generally use a consensus-based decision model. Fiscal's data governance uses a couple of different decision models, bottoms up and top down. And so those are defined by the project activities. Certain project activities can use one model and certain project activities can use another. And that's all defined so that you know what your model will be for the type of decision that needs to be made. Looking at the child support model, this is primarily focused around change control, and one of the things that really interests me about the child support model is that the issues and risks are all embedded in the analysis and design package. So where Camus, we have change requests are a separate animal from issues, which are a separate animal from risks. In the change control model here, issues, risks, and change requests are all in one analysis and design package and have to be documented that way. The other thing here that is of interest to me is that the change control board represents not just the Department of Child Support and the vendor there. It has to represent the 58 California counties, the local child support agencies. And so they are represented by 2 representatives, basically. So 58 counties represented by 1 small county and 1 large county. So if you think about how to represent large and small and medium-sized counties by 2 across 58, the fact that that group has been able to make that work for them is pretty impressive. All right. I will find my presentation again, I promise. There we go. I ended it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do our governance exercise now, and I'm going to, oh, did you have a question?
Yeah,
yes, sure.
A question on the Camus governance.
Mm-hmm.
What type of participants are in each of those different groups? Are they senior managers? Are they ELCs, obviously?
That's a great question. Let me go back there for you. We'll go to the big diagram. So here at the integration work group, we have generally a wide group of project managers. So we have 2 projects at the moment. A couple of months ago, we had 4 active projects that were represented there by the project managers for both sides. So client project manager and vendor project manager. And then we have our quality management organization is represented there. EPMO is represented there. What we call CPMO, which is our Camus or our client project management office is represented there. Our test team participates in that group. IV&V and IPOC. Depends on which project is in which stage. So if the project is actively testing, we're generally going to get the test manager in there, but that can shift. Did I skip anyone? We had a lot of people that are interested in the integration work group.
Not anyone comes into share the status, because we share status across projects, so a lot of people are interested.
And then when we have our senior project management committee here, our change control board, this is generally director level. So if I've got, 15 different project manager types at the integration work group, I have 6 different director types here at the senior project management committee. And then here at our Camus Enterprise Oversight Committee, that is our executive group. That is our top leaders in our organization. Any other questions before we move into the exercise? Oh, I'm sorry, you're not done. Sure.
Thursday, Friday.
Uh-huh.
So is there a time when you take an issue to the integration work group and they can't resolve it? It goes to the senior project management committee, they can't resolve it. is there a time when you can't get on the Friday agenda and you have to wait for another week?
Yes. So the question was, Paul helpfully reminded me I should repeat the question so everyone in the back can hear. The question was, are there times when I have an issue or a risk that's been escalated and I can't make the agenda of something like this, right? So am I too late in the cycle to make it in? Certainly we take exceptions. If something is burning a hole in our pocket and we know that the right decision body is SPMC or the right decision body is this group, and it has to be dealt with, we will absolutely make exceptions for that. We ask that people do some communication and send out some broadcasts to make sure that the groups below that would have needed to know or participate are aware, but we'll add that to the agenda on the fly if we have to. Yes?
So should we assume that decisions aren't being made in the Tuesday meeting? Or are you saying there are some things that people don't quite agree on, and that's the need for the escalation?
So our tenant is that everybody make the decisions at the lowest possible level. Sometimes that doesn't work. People don't know that they can make decisions or they just can't come to agreement. The first place where we'll really bring them together and try to start forcing those discussions is the integration work group. And a lot of times through those discussions, we can come up with a solution or negotiate our way through some of those tough conversations. The integration work group for us in and of itself doesn't have decision-making authority. So that group can't say, yes, you can hire, another analyst if it's not in your budget, or yes, you can skip system test, it's not that important kind of thing. But a lot of times in the working level discussions where you force people into a room and talk to each other a little bit more, you can actually end up negotiating a decision. It's once we get up to the senior project management committee, that box in the middle, that we start seeing areas where there is specific budget authority. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's an excellent question. Okay, so the question was, when decisions get made in one area, how do other stakeholders get notified? Is there a centralized decision log? The answer to that for us is we have a couple of different variations on there. Paul's going to talk with us about a centralized repository in a bit. For our change requests, they are logged in a tool, which we call ClearQuest. They're also logged in what we call our Change Control Board decision log, so that anybody can get to that out on SharePoint. And then we also email blast it out to anybody we think could want it, including the people that actively requested that change. So those changes are logged in a tool. They're logged in an Excel spreadsheet for those of us that are not tool savvy, and then we publish that out on email as well. We also have what we call a key decision log, which may or may not be a change request or an issue or a risk, but we do have what we call a key decision log. So if something gets decided that I think someone's going to want to know about in 6 months, but I might not be here to remind anyone, we have this key decision log, which is also in SharePoint. Any other questions? Yes.
How do you integrate new project approvals, or is that a separate governance?
The question was, how do we integrate new project approvals, or whether that's a separate governance? For CAMUS, they come in as what we call a system development notice, or SDN, or they come in as an enhancement project. And so some of those come in actually pre-approved from our client, and then some of them have to be decided on by our change control board. It kind of depends on the type of project and how big it is. That's, yeah. Anything else? Okay. We're going to do our exercise now. This is where we start getting even more interactive.
You can hear me in the back?
Yes.
Great. All right. You guys are a great bunch. I was a little nervous about coming in and speaking in front of you guys, but after Marie's presentation and whatnot, you guys are great to work with. So I do appreciate everybody being here. I know you guys are all professionals and you have other places that you could have been here. So I feel honored that you guys are here to listen to me talk about project resources for a few minutes. The one thing that I do, like Southwest Airlines, when you pull up to the hangar at the Southwest Airlines, just about ready to get off the plane, and they mention to you, and they realize that you have a lot of other choices, for flying. And I realize you guys have a lot of other choices for places that you'd rather be. So I appreciate you taking the time to come to this particular presentation. All right, so my name is Paul Abrams. I work with Jenny and with Marie in the EPMO. I'm a PMP. I have 20 years of project management experience, ranges from child support, information technology, electric utility, and then also some commercial and government healthcare here in the state of California. One of my passions is to identify business needs and to implement technology solutions. So I like to figure out what the business needs and then implement the solutions and train users and watch the transition from the process they used to have to the new process that they're working now and the new technology, and watching them become more efficient. I also like to manage business process improvement projects. I did that for 3 years over at the California ISO, and I've also dabbled in Six Sigma around the Greenbelt training and helping on those types of projects as well. So projects that I've worked on for the state, I've worked on the statewide automated child support system. So how many people in the room have worked on the SACS project? All right, so there's a few, all right? I like that. It seems to be the one common thread, you know, the 6 degrees of separation. I can usually trace most people back to the SACS project in some way, good or bad. What's kind of interesting, I learned working with Marie, is that I was working with Lockheed Martin IMS at the time over in Natomas, and we were pushing the project on counties like San Francisco that weren't overly receptive, and she worked in San Francisco, so that's our common bond. So statewide automated child support, length of time, about 5 years for that project. MRTU project for the California ISO, that I spent about 8 years on. Workers' compensation, that was a brief stop with Coventry Healthcare over in commercial healthcare. And then the Medicaid replacement system that we're working on right now, the CAMUS project, that's slated for several years. So I'm hoping that doesn't break the my record of 8 years on the MRTU project. I'd like to see that somewhat shorter. All right, so my presentation is called Leveraging Project Resources. That was a topic that I chose. I'm a PM and a techie at heart, so this talks about people, how to leverage standards and guidelines, and then also how to use the library resources, how to best utilize electronics, okay, you know, whether it's SharePoint or other tools to house project information. So I kind of snapped this one up. And again, we're sharing practical experience here. In the short 20 minutes that I have, I'm not going to run through and train you on how to use all these applications and things. It's just kind of an overview. All right, so let's all get a common understanding of projects. So PMBOK, from the PMBOK, says that a project is defined by PMI as a temporary endeavor taken up to create a unique product or service. So one of the cool things about working on different projects here in the state of California is sometimes I get to work with the same people on different projects, but it's always a different focus. It's always a different thing that we're doing, whether we're putting in child support, whether we're doing Medicaid. These projects are temporary endeavors. When they're done, hopefully successfully, you move on to the next one. So as a PM, I asked myself, what services can I leverage? What people can I leverage? What guidelines and what other types of enterprise projects or enterprise programs can I leverage? One of the things I look for is project stakeholders, also known as project sponsors. So I'm looking for my senior management, customers, and project team members, other people who are focused in the same direction, believe that as I do, and want to have a successful project. Business partners, which are individuals or groups that are outside the immediate project team, folks like CGI, for example. Building networks, one thing I want to do to leverage them is build networks. I want to increase my project knowledge base because these folks are the industry experts. If I can get them in and get them to train my people, I can also ask them to maintain flexibility for resources if I need to specialize in a particular area, if I need to increase staff in another area. For non-people things, I'm going to look towards industry standards. I want to show you a few of them, kind of no-cost standards, if you will. These are well published out on the internet for anybody to use. You don't have to go out and buy them. Okay, so industry standards are applying best practices, and of course, industry standards. These are things that have gone before. These are successes and knowledge that is known out in the industry. Best practices. We're not going to reinvent the wheel here. We're going to grab a hold of them and leverage them. And then also I wanted to talk about Lean Six Sigma and other enterprise programs. Lean Six Sigma is something that Xerox has taken the initiative, and they have master black belts who are running the programs and are finding green belt candidates within the project to be able to reduce waste, improve processes, and then capture the gains. So we can use that after we've implemented the project, or take a look at existing processes and be able to make them better than they are now. The other thing that I'll talk to you about is also library resources. I talked about the tools, so I'll show you a few of the electronic tools at the end that we use to capture a lot of this information. As Marie had mentioned, we do have a central change management repository as well. I wanted to take a look and find a graphic that would illustrate what leverage is, and I kind of like this one. I saw this hand, this little A on the diagram, reaching down and trying to move this big boulder, and I thought, that's it, that's my project manager, and on the left is my project, right? Okay, so if A is the project manager, the power behind this, the definition I found that I liked the best was great or market ability to do or act, the strength, the might, the force. So the project manager is the person that has all the responsibility and none of the authority to get this project done, right? And sitting off to the left in front of him is all of that weight, the project challenges, okay? Everything and everybody, all those negative thoughts, those negative bubbles that are saying, you can't do this, it's going to take too long, it costs too much, we don't want this, okay? So that's the downward force. That's the force that he's got to apply the pressure against. So that's, as a Xerox executive had mentioned, the ability to move the big rocks. That's what the PM needs to be able to do. So C, the fulcrum, the standards, the frameworks, the stakeholders, the business partners, the folks that you can get on your side, the folks that you can leverage. So I have my project manager applying a little bit of pressure, utilizing standards and frameworks, talking to the people, the resources that can help, and actually being able to move the big rocks. So the tip here is that PMs who leverage resources face fewer and less severe project challenges. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about project stakeholders. PMBOK says they're persons or organizations actively involved in a project or whose interests may be affected positively or negatively by execution of a project. So without going into too much detail, positive or negatively, if you think politically, okay? On some projects, there are folks who are very much in favor of it happening and folks that are very much not in favor of it happening. So it's important to manage both of those, okay? Folks that support you and folks that aren't quite happy with what you're doing. So I want to leverage these guys by securing sponsorship and resources from senior leadership. I leverage them by establishing project governance, change, and approval processes, making sure that they're involved in those decisions so that they have buy-in and, of course, decision-making, some transparency to the project, and also involvement in decision-making. I want to involve users, my users of the project, my end users, during the project development to secure their buy-in. I want them to be part of the solution, to be involved in the decision, the discussion, and the implementation to secure their buy-in. And then the other thing I want to do is prepare our staff for new processes and to leverage their skills. So these folks are going to need to learn this new process that we implement and also increase their skill level. Okay. So here's an example of stakeholder analysis. I want to document the responsibility of approvers, workers, and SMEs. How many of you have put together a RACI chart for your project, actually identified folks and their responsibilities? Okay, so this is what it is. This is a sample of one that we use on the CAMUS project. Again, it's role-based and it's a living document for the life of the project, right? So this morning we heard about changes. Anything longer than 2 years, there's a lot of changes on the project. So what I want to do, even though I capture the name, I'll also capture the organization and the role, so that if it does change 6 months from now, a different group is responsible, then I'll put them in. I'll change that out. I also identified dependencies between stakeholders and know who to contact for change requests and escalations. Okay. So now I want to talk about business partners, and partners are persons or organizations who share mutual business interests and contribute towards project success. So these are folks that we work with. We combine the the partner resources to align organizational and staffing levels. So one of the cool things about partners is they tend to be a little bit more flexible. So if I need a little bit more in the EPMO, if I need a little bit more in testing, they're a little bit more flexible to hire and bring people in or even transfer them in from other projects relatively quickly. I also want to share some administrative, financial, and risk liabilities with them. So if you think about a fixed price project, right, and I need to get this done in 4 months, what I can do is I can ask them to give me a price and a guarantee that they will get it done in 4 months. So that transfers the risk over to them, and if they can't get it done, doesn't look like they're going to get it done, they can simply, you know, increase resources to make sure it happens. It doesn't cost me anything as the prime. So applying technology and industry best practices, a lot of the vendors come in with that structure, with that methodology baked in. Providing training and knowledge transfer to project team members. I want them to bring in and to come in and to train my people, because they may not have competencies in certain areas, but if I could bring the vendors in to help implement and train my people on the solution, then I can grab that project knowledge and keep it in-house. And also assign specialized resources to non-core competencies. There's some things that I simply don't want to do or don't want to specialize in. I can bring in partners to help with that. Okay. So business partners on the Camus project, kind of a snapshot of some of our major folks that we work with. The prime is Xerox State Healthcare, of course, and they provide information technology services. We also leverage the folks at CGI to staff our quality management organization and to give us that function. They also augment our enterprise project management office, and they're responsible for our test planning, test support planning, and execution. And then for hardware and software, the stuff that the software actually runs on, for IBM, we depend on them for system development and operations. And I've chatted with a couple people from the state who mentioned that when I talk about subcontractors, they talked about the risk of subcontractors, because you contract with Xerox, and then you want to make sure that the subcontractors that they bring on are, you know, good subcontractors, that they're going to deliver what they promised. So there's a risk to the state. But as the state builds relationships and gains knowledge, they can also gain skill and experience from the partners as well. Okay? All right. So the PMBOK, how many of you've heard of the PMBOK, right? There's a lot of PMs in the room, okay? So the Project Management Body of Knowledge, internationally recognized standard, okay? It's actually got an IEEE number. Okay. The PMBOK itself is general in nature and provides the fundamentals of project management. So to read through the PMBOK, you can't actually manage a project without putting a little bit more detail to it. So it tells you what to do, it tells you the order to do it in. It doesn't tell you the methodology. That's something that you need to write yourself on your own project. That's fairly specific. That defines the what, the who, the how, the when, and how much. That's the detail. PMBOK, again, generally accepted set of good practices that reflects the collaboration and knowledge of working project managers. As mentioned this afternoon, we're already up at the 5th edition, so it's a compilation of all the good best practices from project managers. The one thing that kind of hits home here is that the CTA and the Center for Project Management and several state agencies developed what you guys are probably familiar with, the CAPMM, the SIM 17, using PMBOK and best state practices. So that was actually developed from the PMBOK. Okay. So the other standard I want to run by you was the CMMI, the International Standard of Performance Management. Carnegie Mellon put this together. It's a structured view with 5 levels of process improvement, okay, ranging from 1 to 5, 5 being the best, obviously. The one idea here is that you need to have a culture of change within the organization to take a look at your capability now. Is that sufficient within the organization, or do I need to change? Do I need to have better processes in place? So that would be the target level, but keep in mind too, there's also a learning curve there, okay? You can't just do this overnight. It's an entire organizational shift, needing sponsorship, support, and then also the organization, a culture of change. One of the level 5, if you need to go up to mission critical processes, right, the illustration there is that the navigation and pointing aid for NASA's Curiosity Mars rover is CMMI level compliant. If you send something like that to Mars, you want to make sure it works. All right. So there's 5 CMMI levels. We have a CMMI expert at the Camus project. So I asked him, I said, how can I break this down into plain English for folks? And he said, well, he says, here's my landscaping example. He said, at level 1, you do something, right? Your initial level, you go out and you mow lawns, okay? To get to level 2, you need to have repeatable processes. So let's introduce a schedule and a sequence to go out and mow the lawns. Now you're at level 2. You're doing something in a sequence fashion. Level 3, a little bit higher, is defined. You assign recurring tasks and you organize employees. That's when you actually start implementing a little bit of business intelligence. You start thinking about what you're doing and optimizing the way you're going to do it. Level 4 is what they call quantitatively managed, and that's streamlining schedules and routes. Now you're really getting into the best use of people's time, making sure the process is absolutely as efficient as it can be. And then level 5 is optimized. That's when you get out to managing work systematically. So you're using both process optimization and continuous process improvement. Not many companies in the U.S. I think there's just a handful that even approach level 5. And again, that's mission critical stuff. Okay. One other one real quick is the IEEE. Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. They're real big in telecommunications, information technology, and also power generation. The two that are most pertinent to us on the Camus project is the standard for software project management plans, the format, content, and processes that we need to write into the plans. That's fairly well standardized. Also software lifecycle processes. Again, that IEEE standard describes the life cycle of the software project or the product, okay? And it also has suggestions, recommendation standards for facilitating communication among acquirers, suppliers, and other stakeholders. So what DHCS did for us is they put these IEEE requirements for IEEE standards inside the Camus contract to provide a common language and set of practices to produce predictable and consistent results. So what that means is their project managers that they have and their analysts expect that when we write a software management plan that it will have certain elements and certain chapters and certain descriptions so that they don't get something that is completely tailored by Xerox. They get something that is in an acceptable format that they've seen before. Okay. Now I'm a PM in the EPMO. I'm also the requirements management process owner, so this requirements management plan is very near and dear to my heart. The methodology used in the plan, so if I go to the contract and I query the requirements in the contract, it comes up with, all right, when you write this thing, it needs to be PMBOK 3rd edition, adhere to PMBOK 3rd edition. Of course, this is a few years back. CMMI Level 2 for project management methodology, CMMI Dev, the 2 IEEE standards that we just talked about. It's got to adhere to the state's commitment to best practices for project management and also CTA standards, okay? So I just couldn't go off in a corner and just write what I thought should be in a project management plan. I had to go back and refer to all these standards and have a look and see what elements needed to be included. Question? I'm sorry, what? What tool? Okay, we'll get to that. It's IBM Doors. We use Doors as a business rule and requirements repository. We'll cover that shortly. All right, so the point here is the best practice is the use of standards improves project performance, reduces business risk, reduces costs, encourages innovation, and utilizes best practices. Sets basically a common tone for both the vendor and for the state to understand exactly what will be in these plans and to understand exactly what the prime and the subcontractors will do on the project. Okay? All right. So Lean Six Sigma, how many people have heard of it, have used it in their projects? All right. So Lean Six Sigma I'll introduce as an industry-wide framework for process improvement. It's been around for a while. There's 2 pieces to it. Lean is basically talking about preserving value with less work. What do you do now? Can you optimize what you're doing right now? And then Six Sigma is reducing errors and minimizing process variability. So back then, you know, if you were talking about pens, if you had an assembly line, you're manufacturing pens or automobiles, it'd be relevant. But, you know, today, it's still just as relevant. We've got a couple of projects going on now to improve the audit process and also our change process. So we can actually apply it to processes. It doesn't have to be the manufacturing of widgets. Okay. Now again, we talk about a culture of change. We need strong management leadership and support, and Xerox is pretty cool in that, like I mentioned, they have the master black belts who actually run this program. What we want to do is measure our process capability and implement improvements. How efficient are we now, and how much better can we be? What appetite do we have for getting better? Deciding on the biggest bang for the buck. One of the things here, you don't want to bite off a huge project, a multi-year project, and wait until that shows improvement. In order to get this program, this type of enterprise program rolling, you want to decide on the biggest bang for the buck and prioritize on the low-hanging fruit. So what you see that you can improve right away, and then bring back to management and say, here, this is what I've done. This is the improvement that we've made right away. All right. So again, Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma is just one of the enterprise processes that Xerox offers. Kind of cool because it allows us to take a look at projects or processes that we have currently implemented and try to make them better. This is called the DMAIC, what I'm showing you here. There's 5 steps to it: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So just real quickly, it's a cyclical process, and what you do is you take a look at a bigger process that may have many areas that need improvement, and then you go in, you take a look at them, you define a problem, you measure it, you see how severe the problem is, analyze what you can do about it, and identify the root cause of the problem. And then go in and implement solutions that will improve it, okay, that will reduce your variability, reduce the number of defects, and then set up a program where you can actually control, where you can sustain the improvements. You can actually see, you know, we had 5 defects per 1,000, you know, now we're down to 3 defects per 1,000, so you actually control it. And then you go back and you look and you say, what can we improve next? What can we improve next? So it's a cyclical process, okay? All right. So the next section that I wanted to talk about was a library of resources. This is kind of near and dear to my heart, being an IT person. And I'll talk to you about a little bit about business collaboration, how we can use these resources for business collaboration, and then also for centralized file sharing. All right. So library resources, one of the cool things in IT that has happened now is that everybody can use a browser, right? And everybody can, you know, put a favorite in their favorites list and get to it. So a lot of the tools that we have are accessible through the web, and in fact the Camus project itself, the system, the replacement system, has the requirement that everything is web-based. So the client needs to be able to open up a browser and get to any of the applications, all right? So if you have central libraries of project resources, we're going to make them available at any time. We're going to have single sources, authoritative sources of documentation, one-stop shopping. That policy manual is only in one place. The project schedule is only in one place. We're going to store project deliverables, work products, and other information that's accessible to the clients. We're going to support the good folks from IV&V or IPOC to provide project transparency, so they see exactly the same thing. We see exactly the same thing the sub-C and the DHCS sees. We'll have searchable libraries, and we're going to apply security through role-based rights. And of course, as I mentioned, web-based access for non-technical users. It's not like folks have to open up a client application and figure out how to use the application. It's web-based. If they can open up a browser, find a favorite, log in, they're good to go. And then also, I can introduce workflows for reviews, signatures, and approvals, something that I couldn't do, you know, through just a standard application. Now, if I use something like SharePoint, I can actually post a document, folks can review, I can ask for electronic signatures and approvals. Okay. All right. So just a quick illustration of business collaboration throughout the project. Just some of the places where we use electronic files. Inception, of course, we develop project management plans and schedules. Elaboration, That's when we've done our requirements elicitation and architectural deliverables. When we get into construction, we've got design documentation, test plans, and defect tracking. And then also in the transition, when we actually move it into production, we've got implementation plans and system manuals. And again, the idea here is that every document that's listed gets posted, it gets reviewed, and then it gets approved, and it's always centrally located to where folks are looking at just the one authoritative source of that document. All right, so a couple items about centralized file sharing. So how many people here use SharePoint in your enterprise? Okay, so about half. All right, so we utilize document metadata for sorting and filtering. We use SharePoint lists, and I've got a screenshot of that next, so I'll show you what that's about. So document metadata means within that Word document I can fill in some additional information. I can post the Word document, and then it allows you to search for that particular document based on that metadata. I can also collaborate on document development. I could post version 1, and we could sit and we can collaborate until version 40 when the state approves it, and then we can move it into a read-only production version. I've got version controls for reviews and document restore, post and share documents over the internet if you want. And then also we talked about the change request artifacts and documentation. Okay. So how do we use that here on the Camus project? So for project documentation, for most of the Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, reports and things, we put those in MS SharePoint. Project schedules and enterprise resource pool, who's working on what, that we store on MS Project Server. Business rules and requirements management is IBM Doors. For software testing, we use Rational Quality Manager. And then also defect management and change management would be Rational ClearQuest. So here's a screenshot of SharePoint that we use on the Camus project. So right in the middle, you know, deliverables library is a read-only place where we put the deliverables that have been approved. So it's read-only for most users except for the deliverables management team. So one-stop shopping, you come here for all of the deliverables that have been approved that are in use on the project. Well, at the top, we have an enterprise menu, so you're within MS SharePoint. Do you want to take a look at the Camus home? Do you want to go to other Camus sites? Or we have external links that you can run out to. The left-hand side, we have a site menu, which is basically all the sites within the Camus library. And then across the top here, just below that deliverables library line, we have certain attributes that you can use to sort and filter what you're looking at. And in the body, you see kind of the words and things in there, which is actually the document metadata, the stuff that is entered by users in each one of those MS Word or Excel documents to allow for searching. Okay? All right. So MS Project Server. We use that for master schedules and project schedules. We also store our enterprise-wide resource pool of project resources to know who's working on what at any given time. And that provides visibility, of course, to both us and DHCS across the entire life cycle. Doors, again, is the business rules and requirements repository. We verify that contractual commitments, contractual requirements are met with system solutions. We engage stakeholders in a collaborative requirements lifecycle process from validation all the way through satisfaction and change requests. And then we generate traceability reports to make sure that the requirements that we have are aligned with tests, that there's a satisfaction method that we can show. Rational Quality Manager is where we store our test plans, test cases, and test scripts. We support status tracking as test cases progress through execution, and then also provides a source for test execution metrics. ClearQuest does a couple things for us. It provides the data of record for change requests. We can track their status, and then we also monitor the number, reason, and type, and associated risks of changes. And the last thing that we do in ClearQuest is it provides our defect tracking. It's our defect tracking tool. Okay. All right, that's what I had. That was my presentation. Any questions?
Track your resource utilization using this tool? Like, say allocation and task reporting?
Okay, so the question was, do we track inside the tool? You're talking about MS Project Server, right? So do we track resources, what tasks they're working on? Okay,
You do that through the schedule, but
that's correct.
can you tell if a resource is over
Yes. So there are some projects there are some schedules that we have that are not effort driven. The ones that are just kind of fixed duration. So there are some that we have that say it's going to take us 20 days to do this, and it's going to be the test team that does this. So in some cases, we don't track it down to that level. Now, when we get down into a billable project, okay, where we're going to bill the state for time spent on the project, that's when we get down, and that's when the poor project manager has to sit down and put in exactly the resources and the amount of hours we imagine it would take. So that information is pulled from the schedules, okay, and it's compared to. Do you want to?
Project participants on that would enter their actual hours into project web access or project server, and then a comparison is done within that tool, or if they forward to Excel, of the estimated original hours and then the actual hours, which will tell you if your project was cheap or not.
That's done only on the vendor side, or is that an integrated project team on both sides?
For us, it's generally on the vendor side. The tool would support both if our clients needed or wanted to track their hours as well. The tool would support that. That's not how we're set up.
Cool. All right. Any other questions? All right, awesome. Again, thank you. You've been a great audience.
So, my name is Jenny Clark, and I am actually relatively new to CAMUS, as well as to the project management world as a whole. I spent the majority of my career, and I won't tell you how many years that was, because that might give away my age, on the technology side of Xerox, the copiers that you all know and love, and recently joined the CAMUS project. But during my career with the technology side, I managed a number of teams and a number of work groups to deliver administrative requirements to our customers, and have a lot of experience on the management side of the house. My partners, Maria and Paul, they did the heavy lifting today. They've talked to you about governance. They've talked to you about leveraging resources and library of resources. I get the soft stuff, because I'm new to the project management world. I get the people part of the project, but I think we all know that people can make or break a project, right? So I hope to be able to share with you my 30 years of management experience, and to share tips for effective team building that I have learned both on this project and in those years of managing. But first of all, I need a volunteer. I just skipped right over. You know, I spent a lot of time putting that together. So let me just show it to you for a moment, okay? I am also a PM and EPMO. So we're going to start with a little bit of an exercise, because I think you need to move and groove a little bit. I need a volunteer. Who would like to volunteer to be my victim? It's not hard, honest. Oh, come on up. I'll have to go what? Yeah, absolutely. You're going to be on the camera.
She needs a prize.
And what is your name? Doris.
Therese?
Doris with a D.
Doris with a D. Okay, Doris with a D. So here's the deal. I have this cow king sheet.
Okay.
The kind with the big, deep pockets.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, I have those.
We're gonna all messed up.
Okay.
Can you fold it for me, please? Paul, if you would time this.
Sure.
So no pressure, you know. Take your time, whatever it takes. But I'd like it neat. I'd like it neat. I was supposed to pick a man, a short man, who didn't fold sheets often, but here I pick a woman who's got the hang of. Yeah. Oh, coming along really well there. Whoa, look at this. She's motoring.
Something like that, almost. It's always at the bottom where I always have problems.
You didn't even use the floor. I usually use the floor.
Or I use my bed. Something like that.
Wow, that was awesome.
Oh, wow. Looky there. Very nice. Good job. No, hey, whoa. We're not
Darn.
So, but now you get to pick 3 people you want to help you.
Oh, well.
So just
alright.
point out, who would you like to help you?
I think the gentleman in the blue shirt with the tie in the very back, glasses.
Okay, come
No,
on.
no, don't look
down.
back. That's you. Okay, so that's one. I think the lady over here in the teal shirt. And,
Come on up, guys.
and I think this gentleman right over here with the tie and the good shoes.
Okay, come on up. Oh, he's slipping around, coming in the side door. Okay, well, I undo all your beautiful work. I'm going to give you guys 20 seconds to collaborate about how you're going to do it this time. How you're going to get the sheet folded.
Do we elect a project manager?
But at this point, I think you're the project manager. You've already been through the process. Decided how you want to do it.
How are we going to do this one?
So,
You can whisper.
So I grab 2 corners, put them in, then I do the other 2 corners, and take them all, put the corners in together, and then start.
Do we all have to take a corner and then take each other out?
We
You can try that.
Okay, are you ready?
We all have
Well,
to be
I don't know if we're
involved,
ready,
right?
but
So, Paul, how long did it take the first time around?
55 seconds.
55 seconds. Okay. So, you're in charge. And tell us when you're ready to start, once you have your team engaged.
sure, why not? Okay, ready? Go. Okay, everybody grab a corner. Okay, these 2 corners come together.
Ready, set, go. Okay.
Okay, and then in. Got it? Flip it the other way. There you go. Okay, and then bring these 2 corners together. And then in. Okay, and then angle. So here, you grab this corner. We'll all be involved. There you go. And then flip that, no, wait. Just fold so that it's a straight line. Yeah, so fold your end in so it's straight.
so
There you
it's
go.
straight.
Yeah,
Wow,
it's
look
straight.
at there.
And then we'll bring
I learned a new tip.
there you go. And then bring those 2 up. There you go. And then fold again.
Done. How long?
45.
Okay. And that is a lot lovelier than the first time around. Are you a PM?
Yes.
You are, okay. That's for the evidence. Thank you so much, all of you. So obviously, we wanted to get you up and to have...
I learned something.
How to,
What's the secret? I also have a little secret on that little exercise. I used to be a CNA, certified nursing assistant.
oh, okay.
Yeah. I do things fast.
I couldn't have asked for a better volunteer. Thank you for that. So obviously, part of the purpose of that was to have a little bit of fun and to get up and move a little bit. But the other part was to demonstrate that we can often be much more effective as a team in getting things accomplished than we can as an individual. So before I get started on my actual presentation, we're going to talk about leveraging client-vendor work groups to get projects done. But I have to share a little story with you about the first time first and only other time that I did that illustration, because it's kind of funny. It was one of life's most embarrassing moments. I was Sunday school superintendent at my church, and I had been tagged to do the children's story that day. So I'm going to teach the kids about teamwork and how working together to make things happen makes it a whole lot easier, and it's a good value to have and all those kind of things. So I take the sheet that similar to the one I just had, and I shake it out in front. And I inspected this sheet really, really well before I came to visit you today, because what happened was, as I shook it out, a pair of my underwear went flying across the front of the church. Yeah. A little static cling. I hadn't realized I'd folded it up in the sheet. So one of my best friends is the organist. She sees my embarrassment, jumps off the organ bench, comes over, picks it up, throws it behind the pulpit. Yeah. So, not so bad if we'd have remembered to take care of that little issue after the children's story. But no, we took the kids off to Sunday school. Lo and behold, the middle of the service, we do what? We take the offering, right? pastor reaches down to get the offering baskets out, offering pans from behind the pulpit, and guess what's lying there? Yeah, so that was, I was 21 at the time, hugely embarrassing. And this is the first time I've been brave enough to use that illustration since then.
Grateful there wasn't YouTube back.
Exactly, because I'd have gone viral, I think. So I found a couple of quotes that made me smile. Hopefully they will you as well. Teamwork is the ability to work as a group toward a common vision, even if that vision becomes extremely blurry. We heard Holly say this morning about how rapidly the world is changing, and if you've worked on a project for 2 or 3 or 4 years, probably a lot of things have changed during the course of your project plans, and the vision has become blurry. And then the other is individuals can and do make a difference, but it takes a team to really mess things up. And as a PM, we don't want our team to be the one to mess things up, right? We don't want to get to the end of the project and find that the tracks don't come together because the work group has been going in the wrong direction. So how do we leverage project teams? And I'm speaking specifically to client and vendor work groups. That's what we use at Camus. All of our work groups consist of the client and the vendor. For those of you who do projects for internal organizations, it might be an integrated work group of somebody from the organization that you're doing the project for and the project team. So Wikipedia defines teamwork as a cooperative or coordinated effort on the part of a group of persons acting together as a team or in the interests of a common cause. A small number of individuals with complementary skills who are committed to a common purpose, approach, and set of performance goals to which all are held mutually accountable. So typically, project leadership will identify the need for specialized work groups. For example, a testing work group. We've talked a little bit about that. Or maybe implementation, or infrastructure, or data conversion. At Camus, we have work groups. You may call them work teams or user groups, but we're talking about the same kind of thing. So what kind of specialized work groups have some of you had on your projects? Anyone? Testing, architecture?
No collaboration?
No work groups? No? Okay.
And runs the gamut, I think.
Yeah.
Depending on what the project is, you have technical teams, and you've got the analytical teams and the business side.
Okay. So accomplishing great things through teamwork doesn't just happen. We're going to talk a little bit today. There's a number of considerations for having effective work groups. We're going to look at tips to consider regarding work group characteristics. We're going to look at tips for work group processes, including a charter and the meeting process. Talk about meeting process and team roles. We're going to look at some work group dynamics and tips for picking and promoting those that will work best on your work team. Talk a little bit about team development, when it might be necessary to do some team building activities. And we're going to look at collaboration. What is it and how do you use it, particularly in a vendor-client relationship to make things happen? We saw a demonstration of that a little bit earlier in the risk exercise that Marie had for you. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about tips for conflict resolution, because if you've got a work group, there's bound to be some conflict resolution, right? So who determines the need for a work group? Who determines the need for a work group in your organizations? I mentioned it earlier. Typically project leadership, right? Decides whether or not there's specialized work groups that are needed. So let's say that you're the testing PM and you're tasked with putting together a work group or a team. There are a number of things you're going to want to consider. The first is, let's start with the size of the team. A work group can be 2 to 25, but why do you think it says the average is less than 10? What do you think the benefits are of having a work group of 10 or less? Okay. Can you get a lot done in a group of 25 people? Got 25 different opinions, right? So it's generally more effective and takes less time to get things done if you have a smaller size work group. So you'll want to consider in your work group members that they have complementary skills. Technical or functional expertise. Obviously, if you're running a testing work group, you want people with testing experience. People who have problem solving and decision making skills. People with good interpersonal skills. They're effective at communicating and they know how to constructively resolve conflict within the team. The work group should have a common purpose and team identity. For example, the testing work group. The work group should also have a common approach. How are they going to assign tasks? When are they going to look at schedules and what are they going to look at in the schedules? How are they going to make decisions? And if you have a number of work groups like we do at CAMUS, I think we probably have,
at least 20, maybe 25 individual work groups across many projects.
right. When you have that many work groups, you kind of want there to be some standardization. IV&V are going to participate in many of those and they'll be quick to point out if there's some inconsistencies between the work groups. So you may want to put together a work group process or standard operating procedure. In your package, we've given you a framework or a sample to take with you of a standard operating procedure for work group management. We've given you a few takeaways today that hopefully you can take back and tweak and use on your own projects. Finally, mutual accountability. If the work group has common performance goals, they're going to be a little bit more mutually accountable to one another. Yes?
I have a question. I think there's always an assumption when I hear this discussion. So, obviously from the vendor side, you all have it covered because you have to stay current in the skill set. But when you start working with the state, I mean, is there a skill assessment that takes place? Or do you just get the people that you ask for based upon what you ask them? Because I got to be honest with you, I don't think the training is equal. And I think when you just get bodies, you don't necessarily get trained people that know how to participate on these forums. And it to me, contributes to a lot of painful experiences.
It does, absolutely. We're going to try to give you some tools today that will at least help in establishing a framework and a structure by which the work group can be effective. But if they're not all your team members, if they're coming from, for example, in our case, the state, or participants, you don't often have the luxury of taking a lot of time to go through training. But sometimes it's worthwhile to step back and to say, okay, we need to have a little interactive skill training together as a team, so that together you're providing some kind of training and understanding what the expectations are of the work group and how you work together. Because few of us get to choose our work groups. Most of us inherit them. In teams, if you've ever had the opportunity to choose your own, it's wonderful, because you get to pick the people who work just like you do or who complement your skills, but that's not common.
Well, I think the opportunity is there. I'm not so sure we're utilizing it effectively. So today, for example, in the concept area where you're just thinking about it, moving things along, or maybe even when you get to procurement. If procurement takes a year, 2 years, that's plenty enough time for you to be training, getting some people trained. Yeah, I don't see that happening. So I was just curious about how that happens. I'm 4 years into state service, 4.5 years, and so when I came, I made some assumptions that projects, everybody knows how projects are, and then you get into some very basic, I don't know what IEEE is, I don't know how to do a traceability matrix, so I was caught off guard. And so I would have appreciated knowing where people's skills were, and not make that assumption that because I want to go assign the project to go lead it, I think this group of people I'm going to go get are trained, you know what to do. That wasn't the case at all.
Certainly we don't always, like Jenny mentioned, we don't always get to choose all of our folks and to designate what their skill set is. One of the things that we have seen that's done effectively is routine training, basically. So not everyone knows risk management or issue management or schedule management. Microsoft Project Server and Microsoft Project Schedules are not the friendliest of tools. So we do have training that's available because the project doesn't also always, if you have 100 people at the start, by the time you end, you probably have only 20 of those people. So we schedule these trainings on a routine basis, so as people onboard and offboard, we can offer continuous training on some of these standards that everybody has to use every day.
That's good.
Okay, thank you for the question. So I'm going to move us through. I didn't realize we were down to 10 minutes, so yeah, took a lot of time folding sheets. Sorry about that. Well, not so much time, actually. You guys are good. So I want to talk a little bit about a work group charter. I mentioned previously that it's the project leadership who determines whether there's a need for a specialized work group. And at least at the Camus project, the first thing a work group is tasked to do is to define and document their charter. And then to demonstrate that they're an approved work group, that charter has to be reviewed by senior management and signed off by senior management. So this is just a sample of some ideas that might be beneficial to have in a work group charter. And instead of going through them on this one, I'm going to take you through this page. This is actually a sample work group charter. I've included a sample that is much more expanded in your package for you to take back and use as you choose. It has tons of instructions in it, so it's like 5 pages long, but this is a simplified version of what those instructions say. First of all, title of the work group. We've been talking about testing, so I use testing. The purpose. The testing work group is responsible for monitoring and reporting the activities related to system tests, performance tests, etc. Meeting frequency. This work group is going to meet every week, once a week. Their decision authority, they support that it's in accordance with the explicit desire for decision making at the lowest possible level, meaning at the work group level, so they're going to work really hard to make sure that they're trying to make decisions at their level. Their decision process. The chairs will collaborate. Remember, in our work groups, we have co-chairs, one from the customer, one from the vendor. So they collaborate when making decisions, and they use a consensus-based decision-making process. You're going to want to define your membership in your charter. Who's going to be a part of that from the customer or from the organization that you're doing the project for? And who are the required participants? What are their roles and responsibilities? What is it the chairs do? Do you have somebody that takes minutes and scribes? Do you have an issue and risk owner, etc.? The documentation. Are you going to have meeting agendas and minutes? Are you going to look at schedules every week? Issues and risks, action items. Then how you're going to communicate. In our case, this is the timing of the communication and the tool. So MS Outlook is the tool. Timing is that meeting materials are sent and posted 2 days prior to a meeting. So everyone has notice of what's going to be happening at that meeting. And that the minutes and action items are posted within 2 days after the meeting. And then you're going to want to define an escalation process. Marie talked to you about governance, and that is our escalation process if the work group cannot come to a decision. But you're going to want to define what your escalation process is. So the one I want to emphasize most is a work group meeting process. How you conduct and run your work group meetings can make or break the effectiveness of your work group. So if I spent time on anything, it would be on this particular one, that facilitation is critical to make sure that you get somewhere. You can spend, I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting where it goes on and on and on and on, and you walk out and go, what happened there? What did we accomplish? So the facilitator is key to keeping the meeting moving and to making sure that you're accomplishing the things you set out to accomplish to start the meeting. Meeting notification and timing. People need to have an awareness of when a meeting is occurring. Consistent day, time is helpful because they'll plan for it. Meeting process, the frequency of the meetings, the content. What are you going to review in your meetings? What inputs do you need from other work groups to get your job done? What outputs are you going to hand off to another work group so that they can get their job done? The roles and responsibilities, meeting minutes, and a central repository for meeting artifacts. So my tip here is that in your package is a standardized agenda that if used and documented as we encourage our work groups to do, it's the framework that will walk you through the meeting so that you accomplish everything you need to accomplish in the time frame. So you'll find that in your package. So let's talk about team roles. A team is defined as an interdependent collection of individuals who work together toward a common goal and who share responsibility for specific outcomes of their organizations. We all know that people are individuals, and as we talked about a little earlier, you may have to pick and choose from different functional managers who's going to support your project team. And bringing together an interdependent collection of individuals can prove kind of challenging. So, here are some roles that we might find in projects. And in the interest of time, even though I love this slide, I'm going to let you read them on your own. I'll read a couple. The Maverick. This character does things their own way. They may be effective, but they're a little bit difficult to control. Do we have any Mavericks in the room? Anyone admit they're a Maverick? And of course, the workaholic. This person doesn't know when to stop, and they often believe the office would collapse without them. Paul, do we know anyone that's a workaholic? So the point is, while this is cute and kind of funny, the point is that you're going to get all kinds of different people on your work group, on your work team. And your role as a PM or as the work group leader is to assess each of those individuals and how best to use them to the benefit of your particular project. You may end up with a couple of leaders. What would you do? Maybe you'd make them co-leaders so that they're sharing the responsibility. Or maybe you put the Maverick together with the team player on a particular task so that they can complement one another in their skills. But it's up to you as the work group leader, if you're the work group leader, to assess the different skills that each of your team members have and to utilize those to the most effectiveness for your project. Work group dynamics, I don't know how long we want to go, Marie. I know we're
We have a competing priority right now, which is the clock.
yeah, exactly. I don't want to say my partners were long-winded, but I would never do that. These are some work group dynamics to consider, the ones that I would say are the most important under team members. People who have the ability to be open about addressing problems and action-oriented. How many of you have known someone with tremendous technical expertise? They're a subject matter expert on everything, but they can't get a darn thing done, right? So you want people who are open to addressing problems and who are action-oriented. They get things done. Team relationships, organizational environment. Under team leadership, probably the key elements I would say are focused on the goal. You as a leader have to remain focused on the goal and keep your team focused on that goal. Promoting a collaborative environment. It's easy to kind of run over the team, but it kind of defeats the purpose of collaboration. And then setting priorities to make sure that the things that need to get done are getting done. Most of you have probably heard of and seen the Tuckman development model for stages. What I want to point out on this slide, and you can go through it at your leisure, they'll be posted and you have them in your package, is how well it lines up with the Hersey and Blanchard situational model. So the right side tells you how the work group lead, the PM, should function in at each of the different stages of the work group. So as the work group is going through the forming stage, the PM is telling them what they need to do. They're giving direction. The group is very dependent upon the leader for guidance and direction at that point. When they get to the storming stage, the work group leader, none of us like the storming stage, but the work group leader is the one that is promoting compromises so that they can get to some kind of agreement and that can enable some progress. And the leader is coaching them through that. When they reach the norming stage, your job is kind of partway done. You're just participating with the work group. They're taking on some of the leadership role, And you're facilitating and enabling them to do, removing barriers so that they can get the work done. And if you're fortunate enough to ever take a work group to the performing stage, it's delightful. You're not needed much. You're in the role of delegating, and team members might ask for your assistance on occasion, but pretty much they're running on their own and they're getting the work done and they're overachieving their goals. Team building, there's going to come a time when you might want to invest in a team building activity. It's hugely popular right now. You can Google it. And it'll give you a number of activities. So I'm going to move on through. Talks about collaboration, tips for facilitating conflict. I think we probably need to move downstairs. So you have the package. It's pretty self-explanatory. The main thing I wanted to hand off to you were some tools that you could actually use: the agenda, the standard operating procedure for work groups, the charter template. And one of the best practices that we've found is that if you have a number of work groups don't always follow this standard operating procedure that you've set for them. I know you find that hard to believe. So as an EPMO organization, we actually developed a checklist, and we go in and we audit all of the work groups on our project to ensure that they're following the process that we've asked them to follow to have an effective work group meeting. Thank you for your time. You've been great. We appreciate you.